welcome to the channel. In today's video we are talking about the brand new Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Before we jump into today's video, if you guys are new and seeing my content for the first time, I do a lot of game reviews and discussions, so if you enjoy the video, drop a like on the video and subscribe to the page. First off, I am a huge Star Wars fan, and I've been looking forward to Jedi Survivor ever since I finished Fallen Order a couple years ago. I was just so excited, and man was Jedi Survivor so freaking good. Like, they literally took all of the feedback, all of the negative feedback that people didn't like about the game, they fixed it here, and they took what worked in the first game and made it even better here in Jedi Survivor.
Or maybe I'll just use this! Your master's lightsaber.
Survivor takes place about 5 years after the events of Fallen Order, and has Cal reuniting with the whole crew of the Mantis. I guess they all had their good reasons for going their separate ways, but nonetheless, it's good to see them all coming back here for the sequel. We also get introduced to a few brand new characters to the crew. We have Bode and Z, a droid, who are great additions to the crew. Seer isn't in this game as much as she was in the first game, but she definitely has her time to shine as one of my favorite parts in the game. The Empire is still very much a threat as you go throughout the game searching for remaining Jedi. On your search, you run into another evil faction known as the Bedlam Raiders, which I personally think were really cool because they took like they found like an old droid command ship, and they took all the droids that were in there, repurposed them so they all work for like the Bedlam Raiders now, but they're all like prequel era droids, so that was really cool. As I said earlier, you are on your search for remaining Jedi, and as Cal is on his search, he runs into this Bacta tank with a dude from the High Republic named Dagan, I keep saying Dagan, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Dagan Gera, who is a Jedi from the High Republic era, and more or less becomes the main antagonist for Jedi Survivor. And man, this guy woke up and literally chose violence. You go throughout the whole game trying to stop Dagan and Ravis, who is the leader of the Bedlam Raiders, from reaching Tanalorr. Now, Tanalorr is a new planet that Dagan and pretty much everyone knows will be safe from the reaches of the Empire. Without going into too many spoilerly details, that's more or less the gist of the story. There are quite a few of super epic moments and some crazy plot twists that I didn't see coming. And as much as I want to talk about them, I definitely don't want to spoil it here, as they definitely should be experienced. The story was really good. I had a fun time. It was a fun, enjoyable ride, as there were many times that I was just blown away. The gameplay here is also very much expanded upon, and overall is just really fun to play. Jedi Survivor introduces new stances that all have like their pros and cons depending on your very own playstyle. The single blade and the double blade make their return from Fallen Order, with the single blade being more of your happy medium. All these stats are the same, whereas the double blade favors more defense and speed. Along with those, they introduce a couple of brand new stances, one being the dual wield, which favors speed but has less defense, the blaster stance, which favors ranged combat but does less damage, and lastly, which is the crossguard stance, the Kylo Ren looking type of stance, which favors damage, does very high damage, but is on the slower side. I played around with all of these stances for a good while, and I ended up just really settling with my two favorite, the dual wielding and also the Kylo Ren inspired crossguard stance. Each of these stances all have their own upgrade tree, allowing for even more move sets. The only real con that I can think of is that you can only equip 2 at a time, which is kind of annoying. I thought it was going to be more of like a Ghost of Tsushima where you can freely swap between several different stances, which I thought would make more sense because it's literally just your one lightsaber. Like, going from the double blade to dual wield is just Cal breaking his lightsaber in half. So, I don't know, I thought it would have been easier to implement that, but that's my only really con, and it's more of just a nitpick. Regardless of whatever stance you guys choose to do, it was just fun cutting through all these droids and stormtroopers. Doesn't matter which stance you were. The combat itself is really fun to play. The game also has a massive variety of enemies, and there was never a time where I felt like the gameplay loop was repetitive, just because there are so many different enemies and they constantly were introducing you to new enemy types. Either you got all your droids from the prequel era, and then you got your stormtroopers. They even throw in a ton of beasts. You'll be fighting Wampas and Rancors. Like, there's just so much enemy variety that I never got bored. It never felt repetitive. I was constantly fighting new people. Oh yeah, and the Bedlam Raiders, they also have a ton of their own different enemies, some super powerful. The game also introduces perks, which I didn't really mess with too much, but they give you like little buffs here and there where you won't be interrupted by blaster fire. And then there's even one where you get more XP from dealing damage to enemies or defeating enemies. So there's quite a few different perks. I didn't mess with them too much, as I kind of forgot about them, honestly, until I unlocked something that said, hey, you have a new perk slot open. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Lightsaber customization also makes a return here with tons of different lightsaber parts, colors, materials, and I spent probably way too much time customizing my lightsaber just to not really even see it that much. Along with that, you can fully customize Cal, BD, and your blaster, which I really appreciated that they allowed you to customize Cal, as in the first game, one of my biggest complaints was that the only customization was just ponchos. There is one poncho in the game, but thankfully that's it. There's tons of different outfits. I ended up going with like this commando looking outfit that had stormtrooper like armor on it, so it was really cool. You can customize his hair, you can have a freaking mullet if you wanted to, have a huge beard. It didn't affect the gameplay or the cutscenes really at all, but it was cool to have that option. Nice little touch there. Just as there is a huge variety of enemies, there is no shortage of boss fights. There are so many bosses in Jedi Survivor. From freaking Rancors to like General Grievous's Magna Guards. There's just a ton of variety. I did play the game on Jedi Master difficulty, which means some of these bosses were definitely pretty tough and took me several times to take down some of them, especially like the Rancor, which the Rancor had several movesets that would instantly one-shot you. Some of my top favorite boss fights are any of the fights with Dagan. All of his fights were super fun, super epic. All the cutscenes were really great. And also Ravis, which is like the leader of the Bedlam Raiders and also kind of Dagan's right-hand man. That fight was crazy. And basically you have to know how to parry, because every time I dodged, I just got punished. He has multiple phases and multiple attacks that are unblockable. But yeah, those two were probably up in my top. There's also a super epic fight with Darth Vader and Seer. I won't go into too many spoilers on that one, but that fight was freaking epic. I mean, I knew Darth Vader was going to make an appearance at some point. I just didn't know when. And just like the first game, when he appears, it's like an oh crap moment. Like, oh crap, oh crap. And it was epic. Literally one of the highlights of the game for me. Jedi Survivor also takes us to a couple of brand new planets. All of the planets I thought looked really cool, were super well detailed. I loved looking at the environment so many times that I just kind of stopped and just looked around and I was like, wow, the detail here is crazy. Especially on like your new home base of Kobo. There's just such a huge variety with Kobo. It's very much like an open world-ish. It's not fully open world, but it is very massive in where you can explore. You start out in like this rocky canyon deserty look, and then there's forest areas of Kobo, and then you can go all the way up to the top of the mountain, and they even have like a whole city up there that is very like give me Cloud City vibes. There's things that are floating up in the sky, so there's just a lot of variety just within your home base of Kobo. It was also really cool to go back to Coruscant, seeing all that and seeing how it looks like even after the Order 66. On a couple planets you do have the ability to use mounts, which I kind of thought were meh. They personally, I didn't think that they were all that fast, especially when you combine Cal with his dash. Like if you hit jump dash in succession really quick, Cal can move pretty fast. And I felt like these mounts didn't really do, they weren't really all that fast, other than to help you at certain parts where if you jump off one of your mounts, it can give you an extra high boost. There's even a glider one that you can only really use at specific locations. It's not like you can use it the whole time. So they did have mounts. I just thought I didn't love them, but I also really didn't hate them, so they're kind of eh. There is also a lot of just really beautiful set pieces that you can get up on the top of the mountain and look at the valley of Kobo. There's even this one spot where you're really high up and you can look down at the droid control ship that I mentioned earlier. And it's even cooler that you get to go down and explore throughout this droid control ship. But it's just really cool. A lot of very visually appealing like set pieces as you go throughout all of these different planets. My only real con, and maybe it's just me hyping myself up, I just thought that there was going to be a a few more planets. I think there's 3 planets, or 4 planets technically, but you don't go to the 4th one till the very end. And there's like a few, like a broken moon and one other thing. Like, I don't know, I just was hoping that there would be a few more planets. But with that said, the planets that we did get to go to were a lot of fun, and I loved all the puzzles that were there. Lots of puzzles in this game, just like the first game. I think there's equal combat to puzzles. Lots of areas that were full of combat opportunities, and lots of areas where you had to figure out these puzzles. And I thought all the puzzles were great. None of them were like unfair. There's a few of them when I figured it out, I'm like, wow, that took me forever and I felt stupid. But puzzles were great. The planets were great. Last thing that I do want to touch on, though, is the game's performance. I played Jedi Survivor on the PlayStation 5, specifically on the performance mode. There's 2 modes. There's the fidelity mode, or resolution mode, and performance mode. Honestly, both of them weren't particularly good. I did stick with performance mode as the frame rate was slightly better than the resolution mode. But overall, the game's launch performance was not all that well. I definitely had a lot of frame rate issues, especially on the more open worldish areas. There's Kobo, and I'm drawing a blank on the other desert planet, Jeddah. Jeddah and Kobo, especially when you're out in those openish type areas, were very, like, you could tell that the frame rate just took a hit. A lot of the areas that you went to that were like underground or just kind of very linear, where you go from one point to point A to point B, frame rate was fine. Didn't dip all that well. Now, at the recording of this video, there have been, I believe, 2 major updates, and it seems like that they drastically changed a lot of things frame rate wise. The game seems to hit that 60 frames more times than not. Although it's not perfect, there are quite a few dips even with this newer update, but it is miles better than when I first played it at launch. I only ran into 2 bugs, and both of them were kind of in the same type of scenarios when I was jumping to a zip line or from a zip line to something else, and I would land and I didn't quite land on the platform, or I missed and I got stuck in a falling animation. And those were the only 2 instances. I didn't have any crashes or anything like that, other than the frame rate and just those 2 bugs. I won't really touch on the PC or Xbox versions, just because I only played on the PlayStation 5, but I've heard that those versions were not any better, especially the PC version. With that out of the way, let us move to my final thoughts. Overall, Jedi Survivor is freaking awesome. For me personally, and maybe this might ruffle some feathers and be a hot take, but I think it is one of the best Star Wars games out there. And for me personally, I believe it is one of the best Star Wars games out there. The story is great, the combat is great, there's so many different boss options, and that's big me. If you know my videos, I love boss fights, and there's no shortage here. I think Dagan and Ravis were excellent antagonists for the game. I really loved Dagan's character. Everything about him I thought was freaking awesome, especially that scene when he hops right out of the back to tank. Dude was choosing violence today. Like, he didn't matter what it was, he woke up and it was violence. But with all those things put together, I'm going to give Star Wars Jedi Survivor a 9 out of 10. They took all of the feedback from Fallen Order and fixed it here. They took all the things that went great here and they made it even better here in Jedi Survivor. Yes, there are some frame rate issues and performance issues, but even with the update now, they're ironing out a lot of those issues now. And if I'm being 100% honest, if they would have came out with this game and it had little to no performance issues, this could have easily been a 10 out of 10 for me. But I just couldn't look past those issues, especially at launch, because they were so glaring and right in your face that it was really hard, especially with that lightsaber combat. Getting those parry times, it just made the game just a tad bit difficulty, especially because I was playing on a higher difficulty. But overall, the core game, the core combat and story, everything about it was so good. I honestly can't wait to see what Respawn does next with Cal Kestis in his story. It was just a all-around phenomenal game. And that's going to be it for the video, guys. If you made it this far, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the page. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite part of Jedi Survivor was. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.
Rise, Jedi Knight.
Remember, trust only in the Force.
So where to now?